It's the right time for Right Time Radio. I'm Tom.
Today's story is The Charmed Fable, Mousie and the Golden Book. It's by Nicholas S. Casal, and it's published by Alpine Line Publishers. They are at www.alpinelinepublishers.com.
And this story is for about ages 8 to 12. So if you've got children out there, please gather them around the radio, turn it up in your car, and we're going to have this is going to be narrated by Art Evans. And in the style of old-time radio, we bring you all kinds of dramas, and this particular one is a narration. And we also bring you occasional poems. And from the serious to the hilarious, from sci-fi to romance, and all my local authors produced locally and live right here at the KRLN studios in Canyon City at AM 1400.
Our author today is Nicholas S. Casal, and he grew up in Palmer Lake, which is in a small town in Colorado. Shortly thereafter, he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in history from the University of Colorado at Colorado Springs, and began working as a paralegal. From a young age, he was attracted to history, myth, religion, and spent several years searching for the religion that best matched his personal beliefs. He is now a practicing Messianic Jew and is happily married to the woman who taught him Hebrew. Welcome, Nicholas.
Thank you very much for having me here.
I'm real excited to have Nicholas here because he is actually, let me start over. Last week we were talking about networking, and Nicholas is one of my friends because of networking. He and I were in a writers group who met once a week in Colorado Springs, and now here he is giving us an excerpt of a book that he has published. So that, if you want to know if networking works or not, yes it does, because here we are today.
Great. All right. And I think it's time for our story.
All right.
So, Mousie and the Golden Book. Here is Art Evans.
In those days, a wrong-hearted cat sorceress named Felicia Muir ruled over all mice. Our people were slaves, forced to surrender the fruits of their labor to Queen Felicia's minions whenever they demanded. Mice were forced into one of two professions, farming or scavenging. The farmers worked their paws to the bone every day and kept only the smallest part of their harvest. Scavengers had an even more dangerous existence, traveling into ancient, ruined cities of the tall apes to seek treasures they would never be allowed to keep. It was on one such scavenging mission that Mousie's father, Toposaurus, had disappeared without a trace. One day, when Mousie was just a pup, after his daily chores were done, he wandered away from his mother's farmhouse down to the creek to play. He kept an eye on the shadows cast upon the ground, knowing that if he stayed out until after sundown, the Queen's nocturnal patrol, vampire bats, would soon fill the skies, and he'd be fair game for them to snatch up to a place from whence he'd never return. Mousie was never one for sports or competitive games. He did not play ball with the hedgehogs or squirrels, or even his 12 brothers and 14 sisters, for among other mice, he was quite small. Instead, he liked to let his imagination carry him away to flights of fancy. Sometimes he'd imagine himself as a noble warrior or the pilot of an airship. Other times, he'd imagine he was anything but a simple mouse. At the creek, he hopped from one stone to another, gripping the rocks with the pads of his paws. He pretended he was a bear, leaping from one mountaintop to the next, while the ocean raged below him. Of course, as a child, he had so little understanding of how large bears truly were. Fish far larger than he swam by, and he pretended they were whales, though he had only heard of such stories of such sea beasts. His game of bear jump came to a halt, however, when a groan of pain fell upon his large ears. He hopped back to shore and followed the sound until he found the source. Lying upon the shore was a frog, dressed in shining silver armor. The frog was nearly twice Mousie's size, and his face was covered in bruises. He croaked in pain again, screwing his eyes shut. Mousie glanced back and forth for any sign of an adult, someone better fit to help this poor amphibian. But soon he realized that if anyone was going to help the stranger, it would have to be he. Always be wary of strangers. This proverb was not just something his father and mother had taught him, but was well known among mousekind in those days. Even so, he could not leave this green amphibian to his fate. "What's wrong?" he squeaked as he drew near. "Oh, wee one," croaked the frog, "great is my woe. I have been defeated this day in dreadful battle against insidious toads. 10 terrible toads trounced me at once. The cruel knaves. 'Twas an unfair fight, and I fear without healing I am not long for this world." "That's terrible," squeaked Mousie, "but I think I can help you. My mom is a healer." "I would be most grateful to you, little mouse," croaked the frog, "but alas, I'm afraid I cannot walk. My injuries are too injurious." "I can help with that too," said Mousie. He hopped over to the opposite shore where he'd spotted some driftwood. He took a stick with a Y shape at the top, then brought them back to the frog. In Mousie's pocket were bandages his mother always made him carry lest he skin his knee. He wrapped the bandages around the top of the crutch to make it sound softer under Sir Rene's arm. Once he'd gotten the frog up to his feet, he slipped the stick under his arm, allowing his new amphibious friend to use it as a crutch. Mousie stood on the frog's side opposite the crutch and supported him under his arm as they made their way back to the town of Akbar. "You show great kindness to strangers," said the frog. "'Tis a rare thing, truly. Surely one so virtuous will be blessed. Might I know my new friend's name?" "I'm Mousie, Mousie Surus." The frog nodded his head. "An easy name to remember. I am called Sir Rene of the Dank Marsh." And the frog tapped the symbol on his breastplate, which was a tree with vines hanging from its branches. "Sir?" Mousie looked up at the frog's bruised face. "So are you a knight?" Sir Rene faltered. He would have tumbled into the stream had Mousie not caught him. "Have you not heard of my mighty deeds? The tales of Sir Rene, Salamander's bane? The stories of Sir Rene, victory of the slimy swamp? The champion of the fearsome fen? The hero of the black bog?" I'm afraid I haven't," said Mousie. He scratched one of his ears and bit his lip. "Forgive me. Here in Akbar, we do not hear many great tales. We only hear what Queen Felicia allows us to." "Oh," croaked Sir Rene, his nostrils flared. "She must be a terrible tyrant."
All right, it's time for our first break. We're going to take that break and be right back with more.
Mousie and the Golden Book.
All right. right. Keep it right here on 1400 KRLN.
Start back up.
Hi, I'm Mark Rexa with the Royal Gorge Route Railroad, inviting you to discover the bounty and beauty of the Royal Gorge region. Book your tickets today through May 10th, and you could save $10 per ticket. Enjoy fantastic local food, breathtaking views, and the kind of service that reminds you why you love to travel. Learn more and reserve your tickets today at RoyalGorgeRoute.com. RoyalGorgeRoute.com.
Family owned and operated in Fremont County since 1984, Zerby Automotive is the name to trust. The experts in all automotive repairs, both foreign and domestic, our technicians are ASE certified. Zerby Automotive is AAA approved. We are committed to our customers, and that's why we offer an unbeatable 36-month, 36,000-mile warranty on most repairs. From oil changes to paint and body work, our team does it all. At Zerby Automotive, we get you ready to go.
Three Links Apartments is committed to providing quality independent apartment living for ages 62 and over and disabled individuals who qualify. Spacious one-bedroom and studio apartments with emergency pull cords and located near the hospital. Three Links Apartments are HUD subsidized, so rent is based on income. For information, call 269-9134 or visit them at 1300 North 15th Street, Canyon City. Complies with Federal Fair Housing Act and Equal Housing Opportunity. Three Links Apartments.
Hi, this is Rochelle Ryder, Crime Prevention Coordinator for the Canyon City Police Department. Please follow these safety tips while using technology. Internet and email scams are prevalent. Follow these simple rules. If you didn't enter a contest, you didn't win one. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And no legitimate company will contact you for personal information. Always use strong passwords and keep your antivirus program up to date. And when purchasing items from strangers, like on Craigslist, don't go alone. For more information, please contact the Crime Prevention Coordinator at 719-276-5600.
KRLN weather, cloudy skies this morning, then mostly sunny, cooler and windy this afternoon. West winds gusting at 15 to 35 with a high today around 59. Mostly cloudy and windy tonight with gusty north winds, a 30% chance of light rain or snow, the low near 27. Mostly cloudy and cooler tomorrow, 30% chance of light snow, the high around 41. 38 was our low this morning. We had a high of 78 yesterday. And from rainfall overnight, we measured 0.05 of an inch of moisture. Now from the Weather Center, 43 degrees.
Talk Radio 1400, KRLN.
We now return to Right Time Radio. The story this week is called Mousie and the Golden Book, being read to us by Art Evans, written by Nicholas Casal. All right, thanks for joining us, and take it away, Art.
She must be a terrible, truly tyrant to deny us such epics. Well, when I am well again, I shall repay her kindness by showing her what is what. Shh. Mousie glanced back and forth to be sure that none of the villagers nearby heard the Frog Knight's words. Mousie had drawn enough attention to himself, helping this outsider. He didn't need to add the talk of rebellion to the list of reasons for the weasels of the day patrol to pay him a visit. Queen Felicia is a powerful sorceress, he whispered. Her magic is great, and her wrath is terrible. You'd best not anger her. Sir Rene sighed and nodded his head. I see. She truly has a hold on your people. His tongue slipped out and licked one of his eyeballs. Very well. I shall strive not to cause trouble for you, my friend. Mom! Mousie called out as they drew near the farmhouse. Mousie's mother looked up from her plow. Her eyes widened and the pupils narrowed when she spotted the frog in armor her son was helping lift toward their house. Mosfred Cyrus, what are you doing? She cried, pulling on her own ears. He's hurt, Mousie squeaked back. Please help him. His mother groaned and rushed to the front door of the house. Get him inside, hurry. Always an obedient child, Mousie did as he was told. He brought the frog inside and eased him onto the top of the dinner table. As far as he could tell, it was the only surface big enough to support Sir Rene. Mousie's mother dug through the cupboards until she found a medicine bottle, one Mousie knew he was never to touch without her permission. She filled the ladle with its contents and held it up to the frog's lips. "Drink this. It will help with the pain." "I thank ye kindly, ma'am," croaked Sir Rene. He sipped the medicine and his face contorted in disgust. "Blech! Begging your pardon, ma'am, but might you have some that's gnat flavored rather than whatever this is?" "I'm sorry, but blackberry flavor was all we have," said Mousie's mother, resting her paws on her hips. "We're not used to treating frogs in this house. If you don't want it..." Before she could finish her statement, Sir Rene gulped down all the medicine in the ladle at once. His whole body shook, and he made a clicking noise in the back of his throat. "No, thank ye kindly, ma'am. I just need to be grateful for what help I can get." "Yes," said Mrs. Surus flatly. "Where does it hurt?" "My face, my head, my ankle, my elbows," croaked Sir Rene. "Oh, is that all?" said Mrs. Surus. She and Sir Rene shared a chuckle. She lifted Sir Rene's leg and slipped off his boot. The frog winced as she did so, and his fingers gripping the edge of the table. "It looks like a sprain," she said. "Nothing broken, thank heaven. Mousie, go fetch the splint and bandages." "Yes, Mom," said Mousie, rushed off to retrieve the supplies she requested. As her treatment of Sir Rene's injuries went on, he worked as her assistant, bringing her whatever she said she needed. Soon, all of his brothers and sisters returned to the small hovel, all rattling off questions about the green beast who lay upon their dinner table. "Children," said Sir Rene, "I assure you, I mean no harm to you or your home. Your brother rescued me from a lonely demise, and your mother has been gracious enough to help heal my injuries." Button, Mousie's older sister, scowled at her brother with arms folded. She shook her head, her great round ears flopping back and forth. Mousie had broken the cardinal rule that all mouse pups knew. He'd brought a stranger into their home. He gave his sister a pleading look in hopes that she would understand his act of compassion. Soon, Sir Rene had all of the children distracted as he told his own stories. He told of a time when he'd fought 5 toads himself, swinging his sword as effortlessly as a conductor's baton. He told them of the time a bass had very nearly eaten him, but he fought his way back out of its mouth. Later that same day, he'd served the bass to his comrades for supper. He told them of something called an octopus, a creature that sounded far too bizarre to be real. He spoke of the desert snake king, a cobra who could spread his venom and kill his prey from afar. Sir Rene had barely escaped that encounter with his life. Most intriguing, though, was his tale of the summer fireflies. Thousands of luminescent bugs filled the air, and Sir Rene felt as if he were walking among the stars. Each firefly told him a prophecy of the future.
Go ahead.
Each firefly had told him a prophecy of the future, and since then, he'd seen all but 2 come true. Like his brothers and sisters, Mousie hung on to the frog's night every word, excited to hear tales of lands so far away from the little town of Akbar. They could hardly imagine just how enormous the world truly was and what sort of wonders it held. The sun set over the horizon, and Mrs. Surratt got to work on preparing bread for her children's evening supper when there was a knock on the door. All of the children fell silent in an instant. "What is it?" Sorane said, glancing up at the door to see who had had all them so frightened. Mousie slipped a paw over his lips and motioned for him to be quiet. Mrs. Surratt trembled as she approached the front door. She rested her paw on the handle and asked, "Who's there?" "Lieutenant Nick of the Nocturnal Patrol," came a low voice from the other side of the door. "Open up, now." Mrs. Surratt glanced back at her children and Sir Rene. She bit her lip and then slowly opened the front door. Just outside the door stood 6 bats, each clad in black armor with black helmets covering their faces. The one at the front was the smallest of any of them, and he shoved his way past Mrs. Surratt as he entered their hovel. Under the visor, his red eyes settled on Sir Rene. "So it's true." Sir Rene sat up, his fist clenched and his eyes narrowing to slits. Nick drew a sword from his belt and pointed the tip at Sir Rene. "We've been looking all over for you, Rene. The Toad King has offered a great reward to Queen Felicia for your capture, as I'm sure you've guessed by now." "I will come quietly," Sir Rene groaned as he stood from the table. "But only if you promise not to hurt these mice." "Most of the family can go about their lives as before," said Nick, his voice reverberating behind his steel visor. "But there is one we must take in for questioning. Which one of you pups is named Mousie?" All of the pups were silent, as was Mrs. Surratt. Sir Rene kept his mouth shut and sneered at the bat. Nick waved his claw to the other bats, and they all barged through the door of the hovel, crawling on all fours. Each stood up on his hind legs and drew his sword and pointed it at the family of mice. "I don't want to get violent, but my subordinates do," said Nick. "Mousie, whoever you are, you have until the count of 5 to step forward. Otherwise, we will put your entire family to the sword." "You wouldn't dare," croaked Sir Rene. He raised his fists. "I'm far bigger than any of you. I'll crush you all if you dare try." Most of the bats cackled under their steel helmets, their voices high-pitched. Nick shook his head. "Rene, don't be a fool. You are injured and unarmed. Any fight would be one-sided. You will not save these pups, so do not give us any more reason to use violence." Nick turned to the mice again and said, 1, 2, 3. Mousie jumped to his feet. "I'm the one you want. Don't hurt my family." Nick reached out and seized Mousie by the shoulder. "No!" Mrs. Surratt shouted. She reached out to push Nick away from Mousie, but Nick struck her in the face with the pommel of his sword. The blow sent her sprawling back onto the ground. "Don't try that again, vermin," growled Nick. "I'm warning you." Mousie looked over at his mother, trying to see if she was still moving. She appeared to be breathing, but her eyes were shut and she made no attempt to move. The other bats all gathered around Sir Rene, their blades still pointing at his face in case he tried to fight back. One slipped around to his back and clapped his wrists in manacles behind him. The bats all pushed Sir Rene and Mousie out of the hovel and out to the streets of Akbar. Mousie's skin felt cold under his fur as he looked up at the night sky. How many times has he heard a mouse scream in terror as the bats carried him away into that blackness? Never once had he seen any of them return. What terrible fate awaited him? To what dark dungeons would these bats take him? Nick bound Mousie's hands, ensuring that the knots were tight. "If you do not struggle, you will not fall," he said. "Do not fear, pup," Sir Rene whispered to Mousie. "I've been in 4 more dangerous situations than this." Those were the last words Mousie heard before Nick took off into the air, carrying him in his claws.
All right, we're going to return with Mousie and the Golden Book, being read by Art Evans and written by Nicholas Casal. Keep it right here on Right Time Radio. We'll be back after this.
Hello, this is Jenny Gatsky, realtor with the Gatsky Homes team at HomeSmart Preferred Realty in Canyon City. We love helping people just like you figure out how to increase wealth by investing in real estate. Whether you are parents wanting to invest for your children's college education, looking to supplement your retirement income, or even retire early, please call us at 719-458-9559 or find Gatsky Homes on Facebook and through our website at gatskyhomes.com. That's GATZKE homes.com. Let us help you secure your financial future.
And so I say, as a follower of this Jesus, that I hate my life in this world. I do not mean that I want to die. I only mean that it is because of my love for the true King. It is my love for his coming kingdom that I refuse to settle for anything less.
Dr. Michael Ziegler, this week on The Lutheran Hour.
The Lutheran Hour is brought to you each week by St. John's Lutheran Church. Listen Sunday morning at 7 a.m.
It may not be stomach issues.
For me, it's intense gas, or pain, or diarrhea, sometimes all at once, over and over.
I spent years with the symptoms, but could never figure it out. No matter what I did, they never went away. So I decided to break it down for my doctor and get really specific about my symptoms.
We discovered that exocrine pancreatic insufficiency, or EPI, may be the reason for my stomach issues.
EPI is caused by my pancreas. It leads to diarrhea, gas, bloating, stomach pain, unexplained weight loss, and oily stools. The symptoms just don't go away.
But EPI can show up with even one symptom.
The good news? EPI is manageable. But to get to the right diagnosis, you have to break it down for your doctor and get specific about the severity of your symptoms. Visit identifyepi.com to learn more and use the symptom checker to help change the conversation with your doctor. Brought to you by AbbVie.
All right, welcome back. You're listening to Right Time Radio. You can hear it every Friday from 10 to 11. It, of course, is being brought to you by Fremont Regional Hospice. Make sure you check out Fremont Regional Hospice in your time of need. All right, back to Right Time Radio on KRLN.
Distant echoes in the darkness. A voice down the hall. "Take this one." Was it day? Was it night? Was it sunny outside? Or was it raining? Mousie felt he'd enter the realm of the dead as he sat in that clammy prison cell. How long had he been there? He couldn't know. Every so often, the guards would come by with a crust of bread so hard he feared he'd break his teeth on it. The pain of those rock-hard rations in his stomach was almost as bad as the hunger itself. If he assumed that the guards dropped off his rations once a day, then it had been 3 days in that cell. But that was only a guess. The sound of footsteps approaching. There was a flickering light moving down the hall. Were they coming for him? He was determined not to go down without a fight. Mousie bared his teeth and clenched his paws into fists. His ankle was still chained to the ground, but whoever had come to collect him for whatever fate they had in mind, would not walk away unscathed. The footsteps drew closer. The sound of steel boots on the brick floor. Clang, clang, clang. Lieutenant Nick stepped in front of Mousie's cage, his body covered from head to toe in black armor. He held up a lantern in his left claw. "Mouse Fred," he said, "if you do not resist me, I will not harm you." Mousie sneered at him, his lips curling up over his teeth. He stood as tall as he could, trying to look as menacing as possible. Nick chuckled. "I'm serious. You are not to be executed, neither are you to be tortured. I simply wish to talk. I promise. Now, will you cooperate?" Mousie thought about it for a moment. Truly, he had no reason to trust this bat. Nick was a member of the Queen's Nocturnal Patrol. Many a mouse had disappeared when these beasts snatched them off the ground in the middle of the night simply for violating curfew. Then there was the undeniable fact that Nick himself had struck Mousie's mother in the face. Now that he thought about it, though, Nick could have simply slain her were he truly as malicious as the others. Had he run her through with his blade, he wouldn't have suffered any consequences, but he chose to strike her merely with his weapon's pommel. Perhaps he's more merciful than the others. Did Mousie Mare dare think it? Did he trust someone who is both a stranger and part of the Queen's army? He unclenched his fists and closed his lips. Now that he thought about it, even if he did try to fight back, he probably wouldn't even hurt Lieutenant Nick. His teeth would never pierce his armor. And fighting an armed foe barehanded was beyond foolish. "Goodbye," said Nick as he unlocked Mousie's cell and opened the door. He stepped inside and unlocked the chain around Mousie's ankle as well. "You can carry the lantern," he said, holding it out to him. Mousie reached out his paws to grasp the bottom. "Not the bottom," Nick shouted at him. "Think, pup. Grasp it from the ring at the top. Otherwise, you'll burn your paws." Mousie grasped the ring of the lantern in both paws as he was told. Nick groaned and shook his head. "How have you survived this long without any sense?" Mousie really didn't think this insult was at all fair. Since mice were forbidden to leave their homes after night fell, they had little need for lanterns. At most, they used candles around the house when it got dark. Even so, he wasn't about to argue with one who could take his life so easily on a whim. Mousie followed Nick down the halls to the dungeons. His eyes occasionally wandered to the other prisoners in their cells. Sick and starving mice, squirrels, hedgehogs, shrews, and gophers sat in each. In one cell, Mousie spied a gray rabbit curled up in a ball, muttering to himself and crying. In another, he spotted a shrew scratching away with the back wall of his cell. But it was his claws that were wearing down, not the bricks. Nick opened a wooden door at the end of the hallway, one without a window. "Inside, now." Mousie obeyed, entering the room with his lantern still firmly in paw. Nick closed the door behind them and gestured to the table in the middle of the room. "Have a seat." Again, Mousie did as he was told. He pulled up his tail so as to not sit on it and seated himself at the table. Nick latched the door shut and then reached up to remove his black helmet. Mousie's mind was abuzz with questions when he saw Nick's face for the first time. The nocturnal patrol beast did not have the long, pointed ears that Mousie had expected of a vampire bat, but rather round ears, much like his own. His nose was not a short snout, but rather came down to a narrow point, with whiskers drooping downward. When he smiled, it seemed his lips had not concealed fangs, but rather 4 incisors. Nick then reached over his left wing and unclasped something from his armor. The leathery wing fell away, revealing it was a fake. Nick then did the same thing to the other side and held up his paws for Mousie to see. You're not really a bat. Mousie tilted his head to one side, thoroughly confused. No, I'm not, said Nick. Like you, I'm a mouse. His eyes, so fierce and terrible before, had now softened, and a friendly smile pulled on the corners of his lips. We have met before. Do you recognize me? Mousie started for a moment, trying to remember where he might have seen this mouse before. I'm sorry, should I? Nick grunted in disappointment. Never mind. You'll figure it out in time. He began to pace the room, all the while resting one paw on the hilt of his sword. Years ago, I was a scavenger. In the ruins, I discovered an old magical relic, something capable of allowing even a mouse to fly. I used it to make for myself artificial wings and presented them to Queen Felicia, along with my request to join the Nocturnal Patrol. She accepted my gifts, both the relic and my own life. In this way, I became the first mouse to rise above his station and become truly valuable to Her Majesty. Though he would not let his face betray his rage, Mousie felt a deeper anger burning inside him once he learned the truth about Nick. He'd betrayed his own kind, joining Queen Felicia's army. Here he was, someone who'd suffered under the cruel and oppressive rule of the sorcerer's cat, and now he had become part of it. Nick continued, It took me years to rise up the rank of lieutenant, but now that I'm here, I have been granted a special authority. I can recruit others into the Nocturnal Patrol. Mousefred, I want you to be my first apprentice. Why me? Mousie asked, wringing his paws together under the table. What's so special about me? Nick stared at Mousie for a moment as if confused by the question. Had he not expected skepticism? Or anything other than total gratitude for such an offer? Why, you? Nick repeated, his brows furrowed. Well, I have my reasons, but consider this. You brought that frog knight back to your home completely on your own. You helped him walk from the creek all the way back to your mother's farmhouse. Isn't that why I got into trouble? Mousie asked. I helped a stranger. Yes, but what interests me is that you were able to do it, said Nick, pointing a claw at Mousie. Clearly, for one so small, you have strength beyond that of other mice. You and I have that in common. The Nocturnal Patrol could use a strong recruit like you. What do you say, Mousefred? Will you join us? No, said Mousie, shaking his head. Snake's tooth, no. His mother had warned him not to use such language, but under the circumstances it seemed appropriate enough. I'm not going to join the same army that snatches wayward mice up in the middle of the night and throws them into dark dungeons. Nick groaned and folded his arms in front of his chest. I was worried you'd say that. He tilted an ear toward the door, then leaned closer to Mousie and whispered, I want you to think a little more carefully about your situation. That frog was a foreign knight. By helping him, you harbored an enemy of the crown. Do you realize what that means? Your actions were treason, and the usual punishment for treason is death by petrification. Petra what? They'll turn you to stone, Nick hissed. They'll force you to drink a poison that will turn your whole body to solid rock. Then they'll post your statue, well, if they don't post it in the Grey Menagerie outside the Queen's castle, then in your hometown as a warning to anyone else who commits treason. Think of your mother. Think of your brothers and sisters. Do you really want them to see that? Nick grasped Mousie's shoulder. Listen to me, pup. Join the Nocturnal Patrol. It's the only way they will allow you to live. Petrification is a slow death. First, your stomach turns to stone. Then your guts. Then the inside of your throat. And it just spreads from there. It takes hours before it's over. I told my commander that I was going to recruit you, and he agreed to tell the executioners to hold off for now. This is your only chance. Mousie hung his head in defeat. He knew that he was destined to suffer a terrible fate the instant Nick had carried him away from his home. For a moment, he dared to hope that Nick was merciful enough to let him go, or release him just after a few lashes of a whip. Now he realized that his fate was crueler than he could have imagined. He had to choose to either join Queen Felicia's army or suffer a slow death. Then again, when he thought about it, if he were to undergo some of Nick's training, there was bound to come an opportunity to escape sooner or later. Certainly, the first time he tried on those false wings, he would be a free mouse. Fine, said Mousie. I'll join the Nocturnal Patrol. Nick breathed a sigh of relief and nodded his head. Good, Pop. We will start your training right away. As of this moment, you are my apprentice. Mousie's guts turned at the words, but he buried his emotions deep. He had a feeling he'd have to stomach a lot of wrong before he got his chance to flee.
All right, we will return with more next week from Mousie and the Golden Bug. We're going to take a quick break and talk to the author and our actor, our reader this week. So keep it here on Right Time Radio. We'll be back after these words.
Royal Gorge Radio's AM 1400 KRLN and Star Country 104.5 FM. And we, along with Fremont and Royal Gorge area businesses, proudly present our Customer Appreciation Day we call Money Day.
Hey, y'all, this is Chelsea Lynn. We heard you, and we want to thank you for playing in our Money Day giveaway every Tuesday. So we are happy to announce Money Day will be going back to its original time of 2:30, starting this Tuesday, April 2nd. So if you're not registered, head on over to RoyalGorgeRadio.com, then be in any one of our Money Day store locations like
any Alta convenience store in Fremont County, Canyon City Brews and Bikes, and Classic Furniture,
Coyote Coffee Den Medical Building Location, Dryden's High Country Bank,
Kaleidoscope Inspiration, Maggie's Candy Kitchen, and Mountain Wookiees,
Prospect Heights Mercantile, The Trading Corner, and Waterhole Number 1.
Be at a Money Day location. Listen for your name, hear your name, and call 276-0331 within 60 seconds to claim your cash. From Fremont County and Royal Gorge area businesses, AM 1400 KRLN and Star Country 104.5.
KRLN weather, cloudy skies this morning, then mostly sunny, cooler, and windy this afternoon. West winds gusting at 15 to 35 with a high today around 59. Mostly cloudy and windy tonight with gusty north winds. A 30% chance of light rain or snow, the low near 27. Mostly cloudy and cooler tomorrow, 30% chance of light snow, the high around 41. 38 was our low this morning. We had a high of 78 yesterday. And from rainfall overnight, we measured 0.05 of an inch of moisture. Now at the Weather Center, 45 degrees.
Talk Radio 1400 KRLN.
All right, welcome back, and you're listening to Right Time Radio, heard every Friday between 10 and 11. And Tom and Lynn are going to talk right now about the credits, and also we're going to do a little interview, too, with our author and our performer today.
That's right. So today is part 1 of the excerpt from the charm fable, Mousie and the Golden Book, and it was written by Nicholas S. Casal and published by Alpine Line Publishers, which is in Colorado Springs, by the way, and they can be reached at www.alpinepublisher.com. And our narrator today was Tom Evans. Now, Tom Evans, Tom Bruno is standing next to me, and I've got all the names mixed up. Welcome to my world. Our narrator today was Art Evans, and our background music was written by Seth Bruno. And, of course, our introductory music was written by Lucas Bruno. So the Brunos are a very talented family. Thank you for making 3 very talented boys, Tom. So what we wanted to do now was just visit with our narrator first. Art Evans, you and I have known each other quite a while. Would you like to tell us about yourself?
Well, here in Colorado, there's a group of teardrop campers, and that's how I met Lynn. And Lynn is a very accomplished writer, and at the teardrop gathering, we typically have a potluck on Saturday night and sit around and tell stories and enjoy each other's company. And Lynn had written a story that she read for us, and I said, gee, that was fun. And I said, why don't I read them for you next year? And because I have this booming voice that I play with at times. And Lynn thought that was a pretty good idea, so she wrote the story. And that year and the following year, I read the stories. And then this opportunity came up, and Lynn asked me if I'd read the story. And I said, sure, that sounds like fun, and it certainly has been. Thanks, Lynn.
Well, thank you for coming. I knew you'd be perfect for the part.
Where are you from, Art?
I live in Elizabeth.
No, where are you born and raised, Colorado?
Oh, no. Okay. I'm a New Yorker.
Okay, I was detecting a little bit of a... Yeah.
East Coast.
East Coast, yeah.
You know what I mean.
I know. Well, with this...
Don't worry about it.
Morning show was filled with East Coasters today, so that's great.
Okay, also we have Nico, and of course I'm sorry, his nickname among his friends is Nico, and
Secret's out now.
I told him I'd slip up and call him Nico. You know, like I said earlier, we were talking last week about networking, and Nico is a prime example of networking and having things happen for you, because he and I met, and I mean, it goes back to me searching for help online, and I connected with a talk forum that had a man on there named Robert Mullen. Robert Mullen moved to Colorado Springs from Pennsylvania.
I think that's right.
Yeah. And Robert, call in and tell me if I've got that wrong. Anyway, he moved to Colorado Springs, and he realized that I lived in Colorado too, and so he texted me, or actually contacted me on Facebook, and asked me to join their writers group. And it's an hour away, so I was like, sure, I'll do that. So I started attending this writers group. This is where I met Nico and his wife Jennifer, who both are very talented people. And so when Tom and I started putting together this show, I said, we really need to talk to these people, because their writing is phenomenal. And so we contacted Nico, and he offered this book to us. And you're getting an excerpt of his book. You're going to hear part 1. You did hear part 1 today. Next Friday, you're going to hear part 2. So be sure and tune in for that. But there's more of that book. So if you go to Amazon.com, and also if you go to our website, which is Right Time Radio, righttimeradio.my-free-website, you can have a link to go to Amazon and you can actually buy this book, which, by the way, I did. So if you saw an uptick in sale, that was me.
I appreciate it.
Are they available locally anywhere?
In any actual stores? Not at this time.
Okay.
Sadly, bookstores, especially the big chains, aren't really doing so well, but certainly we're available online, and that, when you think about it, that's the bookstore in your home.
That's
you know?
right. Yeah.
Or at work, or just on your phone.
Yep, that's where all the sales are. So, Nico, I'm really interested. So, tell our listeners, how did this story idea come to you?
Well, it's funny because actually I've been working on the character Mousy since before I was actually able to write. When I was 6 years old, I just sort of was playing around with some ideas. I watched a lot of cartoons, read kids' books, of course, that sort of thing. And mice were very common main characters in a lot of that sort of thing. So I started drawing pictures of this character I just called Mousy. And around the age, and at the time, I wanted to be a cartoonist. It wasn't until years later that I realized that no matter how many classes I took and how often I practiced, I really just can't draw.
Stick figures don't work.
But I can come up, yes, I can write. I can come up with stories. So when I was a kid, I always thought, well, I'm going to be the next Walt Disney, and Mousy's going to be my big character. And
Mickey Mouse, right?
Yeah, kind of like Mickey Mouse. But, things didn't really work out for that. And then when I was around 9 or 10 years old, I thought, I probably shouldn't be writing Mousy. I mean, the name's a bit on the nose, of course,
so to speak.
Yeah. But then at about 32, I think the character Mousy had always sort of been in my head, and I'd been constantly thinking of ways that I could potentially go back to that story. And at 32, I had this conversation in my head where I thought, I really feel that I need to keep the promise I made to my much younger self and write a story about Mousy. And I thought, well, but that name still, you don't meet a man named Manny. And then it dawned on me that you do meet a man named Manny. His name is Manfred. So similarly, Mousy is now Mousefred.
Nice.
So they were originally just these fun little stories about a mouse who was a wizard and had to deal with the usual problems, predators, cats, things like that.
Very good. Yeah. Well, listen, we are almost out of time. Before we go, real quick, we want to say if you're a writer out there, we want you to submit something to us. Our email is righttimeradio@gmail.com. If you want to see or listen to the show, or you want to listen to previous shows, go to the website that I mentioned earlier, and everybody have good writing
and have a blessed
day. We're trying to say that together, but we fail.
Make sure you tune in next week for Right Time Radio. We'll have the remainder of Mousy and the Golden Book. So stay tuned for that next week. Thanks for listening.
One of these days.